June 13th, 1942, 2:15 in the morning. Oberleutnant Klaus Weber stood on the command post balcony overlooking Benghazi harbor, watching his war end in fire and thunder. The sound reached him first, not the familiar diesel rumble of supply trucks or the distinctive whine of Kubelwagens, but something else entirely. A high-pitched mechanical scream that seemed to violate the very physics of desert warfare. Through his Zeiss binoculars, Weber tracked 18 vehicles emerging from darkness at a speed that made his hands tremble. 50 miles per hour, perhaps 60, across broken dock pavement where German vehicles struggled to maintain 20. The mathematics were impossible. The reality was undeniable. Twin machine guns mounted on each vehicle poured tracer rounds into cargo ships with a combined fire rate that exceeded most armored battalions. Every fifth round glowed phosphorus red, creating streams of light that arced through the Mediterranean darkness like luminous ribbons of death. The vehicles moved in perfect formation, each separated by exactly 50 yards, executing turns with a precision that suggested months of rehearsal. Weber had studied British tactics for 8 months. He knew their equipment, their doctrine, their limitations. This defied everything. The first cargo ship ignited at 2:17. Aviation fuel spread across the harbor surface, creating a lake of flame that reflected orange against the hulls of remaining vessels. The second explosion came 90 seconds later when an ammunition transport took a direct hit. The shockwave shattered windows 300 yards inland and threw Weber to the floor of his command post. When he rose, the raiders were already withdrawing. 11 minutes, 18 vehicles, 5 ships burning or sinking. Weeks of Rommel's carefully husbanded supplies reduced to wreckage and smoke. Weber grabbed his field telephone, shouting orders for pursuit. But even as the words left his mouth, he understood the futility. The raiders were maintaining 45 miles per hour across open desert. His fastest Kubelwagen could manage 30 on roads, 25 on sand. They were not retreating. They were simply choosing to leave. A young corporal stood beside Weber, staring at the burning harbor, with the expression of someone whose understanding of warfare had just been fundamentally revised. The boy turned to his commander, lips forming a question he lacked words to articulate. "What were those, Herr Oberleutnant?" Weber lowered his binoculars. In the distance, the raiders had already disappeared into darkness, visible only as a dust cloud lit orange by the fires behind them. He thought of his own careful analysis, his months of intelligence gathering his conviction that he understood British capabilities. "Ghosts," Weber said quietly. "We just witnessed ghosts." He walked back inside and began composing his report to Field Marshal Rommel. His hands shook as he wrote the opening line. Not from fear, but from the professional recognition that everything had changed. "Herr Feldmarschall, we have a problem. The British have invented something new." 6 months earlier in Cairo, a Scottish mechanic had started building those ghosts. And he was just beginning. July 1941, Cairo, Egypt. Sergeant Thomas McLeod stood in the cavernous expanse of the Middle East Command Ordnance Depot, surrounded by mountains of military equipment that spoke of a war being fought everywhere except where it mattered. American jeeps fresh from the factory, British trucks still wearing their factory primer. Crates of spare parts stacked 20 feet high, organized with a precision that suggested someone believed wars were won through proper inventory management. Tommy was 28 years old, 5 feet 10 inches of compact Scottish engineering precision, with hands that bore the permanent oil stains of someone who understood machines better than people. His face carried the weathered appearance of a man who had spent his youth in the windswept highlands, but his eyes held something harder. Something that came from watching a brother die because metal moved too slowly. He knelt beside a Willys MB Jeep, running his hands over the suspension components with the focused attention of a surgeon examining a patient. The vehicle had arrived 3 days earlier, part of the first Lend-Lease shipment from America. Specification sheet claimed 65 miles per hour maximum speed on paved roads, 20 miles per hour in sand if the driver was optimistic and the sand was firm. Tommy had spent 20 years learning that optimism killed people. His father had taught him the fundamental truth in a garage in Inverness when Tommy was 10 years old. The elder McLeod had been a mechanic for rally teams that competed across the Scottish Highlands, where terrain could shift from paved road to muddy track to rocky stream bed in a matter of miles. He taught young Tommy to listen to engines the way doctors listen to heartbeats, to feel problems through vibrations before they became catastrophes. "Speed is not about going fast, lad. His father's voice still echoed across 20 years. It is about control. Every part working perfect, every second counting. The lesson had been reinforced tragically when Tommy was 16. His father died when a brake line failed during a routine test drive. The failure was minor, the kind of thing that could have been caught with proper inspection. But his father had been tired, had skipped the detailed pre-drive. Czech had trusted that everything would probably be fine. Probably was not a word Tommy used anymore. He learned a second lesson 7 weeks ago, written in blood on the beaches of Dunkirk. Private Andrew McLeod, 26 years old, had died on a French road while retreating toward the evacuation beaches. Not from German bullets, but from German speed. The Panzer columns had caught Andrew's unit on a narrow road where British trucks and refugee vehicles created an impassable jam. The Germans simply moved faster, arrived sooner, killed more efficiently. Andrew's last letter home had been clinical in its assessment. "We were too slow, Tommy. The Panzers caught us on the road and there was nowhere to go. If we had been faster, if the trucks could have moved, if we could have just gotten away, but we could not. Speed killed us because we did not have it." Tommy had enlisted the day after receiving that letter. Not from patriotism, though he felt that too. Not from a desire for revenge, though that burned in his chest like acid. He enlisted because he was a mechanic, and his brother had died because metal moved too slowly, and that was a problem Tommy knew how to solve. But the British Army had other plans. They looked at his pre-war experience building rally cars and assigned him to the Ordnance Depot in Cairo, hundreds of miles from any actual fighting. Safe, useful, utterly removed from the war that had killed his brother. For 14 months, Tommy had maintained trucks. He had optimized fuel consumption. He had streamlined maintenance schedules. He had done everything except the one thing that mattered: make vehicles fast enough that men could survive. Until tonight. The depot was supposed to be closed. Tommy had requisitioned the keys through a bureaucratic process that involved lying to 3 different sergeants, but the guards knew him and did not ask questions. He worked best in silence anyway, after everyone else had gone home. He was examining the Jeep's transmission when he heard footsteps behind him. Tommy turned and found himself looking at a British lieutenant with his leg in a cast leaning heavily on a cane. The officer was young, perhaps 25, with the kind of aristocratic face that suggested expensive schools and proper upbringing. His uniform bore the insignia of the Scots Guards, though the dirt and wear suggested recent field experience. The lieutenant smiled, apparently unbothered by discovering someone in a depot that was supposed to be locked. "Lovely evening for Grand Theft Auto, is it not?" Tommy stood instinctively, moving to attention, but the officer waved the formality away with his cane. "At ease, Sergeant. I am not here to arrest you. I am here because I heard there was a mechanic in Cairo who rebuilds rally cars in his spare time and understands speed the way most men understand breathing." The lieutenant extended his hand. "David Sterling, recently of the Scots Guards, currently of too many bad ideas and not enough common sense." Tommy shook the offered hand, noticing the strength in Sterling's grip despite the obvious pain the man carried. "McLeod, sir. And I was not stealing anything, just examining equipment. At midnight, in a locked depot." Sterling's grin widened. "I like you already." The lieutenant limped over to the Jeep, running his hand along the hood with an expression Tommy recognized. It was the look of someone seeing not what something was, but what it could become. "Tell me, McLeod, what do you see when you look at this?" Tommy considered the question. The honest answer was inadequacy. The Jeep was too light for serious military work, too exposed for combat, too limited in range for desert operations. Every senior officer in the British Army had examined these American imports and concluded they were barely suitable for rear area courier duty. But Sterling was not asking for the obvious answer. "I see," Tommy said slowly, "a platform that weighs half what our trucks weigh with a power-to-weight ratio that could be exceptional if properly tuned. I see suspension that is completely wrong for sand, but could be modified. I see a vehicle that is fast on roads, but could be faster everywhere if someone understood how to optimize it." Sterling's eyes lit with something dangerous and electric. "What if," the lieutenant said, his voice dropping to the tone of someone sharing a conspiracy, "we could make this bloody thing fly across the desert? What if we mounted guns on it? What if we could carry enough fuel to penetrate 200 miles behind enemy lines, hit targets the Germans think are unreachable, and disappear before they could respond?" Tommy looked at the Jeep again, his mind already calculating modifications, suspension upgrades, gear ratio changes, fuel capacity expansion, weapons mounting systems that could handle the vibration of high-speed cross-country travel. It would be, Tommy said carefully, technically possible. Difficult, but possible. How fast could you make it go across sand, not tarmac? Tommy did the mathematics in his head. Stock configuration maybe 20 miles per hour sustained. With proper modifications to reduce weight, improve power delivery, optimize the suspension for desert conditions. 40 miles per hour, maybe 45 if everything worked perfectly. And German vehicles. Kubelwagens manage 25, maybe 30 on hardpack. Trucks are slower. Their armored cars are fast but heavy. They sink in soft sand. Sterling leaned against the Jeep, his expression transforming into something Tommy would later recognize as the look of a man seeing the future. So, if we mounted guns on these carried enough fuel to raid deep and moved at 45 miles per hour, when the Germans can only manage 25, they could not catch you, Tommy finished. You would appear, attack, and vanish like ghosts, Sterling said softly, then louder with conviction. I am forming a new unit. Special Air Service, though we have no aircraft yet and likely never will. We need someone who can turn toys into weapons. Someone who understands that speed is not just about going fast, but about survival. Tommy thought of Andrew bleeding out on a French road because British vehicles could not outrun German ones. He thought of his father's lesson about precision and control. He thought of 14 months maintaining trucks in Cairo while other men fought and died. When do we start? Sterling's smile could have lit the entire depot. Tomorrow, but first I need you to understand what we are really doing here. The lieutenant's face turned serious. The British Army thinks I am mad. They gave me 66 men and told me to prove parachute raids can work. But I do not believe in parachutes anymore, McLeod. I believe in wheels. I believe that the desert is not an obstacle, but an ocean, and the right vehicle can sail across it faster than anything the Germans can field. I need you to build me that vehicle. Tommy looked at the Jeep. In his mind, he was already stripping it down to the frame, replacing every component that limited speed, adding everything that enhanced lethality and range. How many do you need? As many as you can build, but start with 6. Prove it works, and I will get you the resources for more. They shook hands again, and Tommy felt something shift in his chest. Purpose. Direction. The possibility that his brother's death might mean something if Tommy could keep other brothers alive by making them faster than death itself. Sterling turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, McLeod. The officers in supply will not give you what you need. They will tell you it is against regulations to modify standard equipment. They will say you are wasting resources. They will try to stop you. So what do? Sterling's grin returned. You ignore them. You borrow what you need. You trade favors. You become very creative about what constitutes authorized requisitioning. Because in war, Sergeant, the winner is not the side with the best regulations. It is the side that breaks the right rules. He limped away into the darkness, leaving Tommy alone with 6 Jeeps and an impossible deadline. Tommy walked back to the Willys and placed both hands on the hood. The metal was still warm from the Egyptian sun, cooling slowly in the desert night. He closed his eyes and listened to the silence, hearing in his mind the sound this vehicle would make when it worked perfectly. The engine note, the suspension articulation, the mechanical symphony of parts working in harmony. For Andrew, he whispered. Then he went to find a welding torch. November 19th, 1941. Libyan desert, 150 miles south of Tobruk. The parachute operation was supposed to change everything. 55 men of L Detachment Special Air Service jumping into darkness to raid 5 German airfields simultaneously. The plan was elegant in its simplicity: drop-at-night approach on foot, destroy aircraft with explosive charges, extract via trucks from the long-range desert group. Lieutenant Jacques Lewis had spent 3 months perfecting the demolition charges. Small thermite-based bombs that could destroy an aircraft with a single placement. He called them Lewis bombs with characteristic Welsh understatement, and they were brilliant in their deadly efficiency. David Sterling had planned the operation with meticulous attention to timing and coordination. Every detail accounted for, every contingency prepared, except the weather. The storm came from nowhere, a freak meteorological event that turned a clear Mediterranean night into a howling chaos of wind and sand. Parachutists were blown miles off course, scattered across the desert like seeds in a gale. Men landed in enemy positions in minefields and trackless waste, where the long-range desert group could never find them. Tommy listened to the disaster unfold over the radio communications back at base, his hands gripping a wrench so tightly his knuckles turned white. The voices crackled through static, painting a picture of catastrophe in disconnected fragments. Charlie section cannot locate drop zone. 3 men injured on landing, require immediate. Under fire, taking casualties. Abort mission, repeat abort. Silence. Then hours later, the survivors started coming in. Not 55 men, not even half. 21 made it back to the extraction point. Exhausted, wounded, defeated. 22 men dead. 12 captured. 0 aircraft destroyed. Tommy stood in the motor pool as the trucks returned, watching men who had left as elite raiders return as broken survivors. He searched each face for Lieutenant Lewis, finding him eventually in the 3rd truck. The Welshman was injured, a bandage wrapped around his head, his uniform torn and bloodstained. Lewis climbed down from the truck, slowly moving like a man who had aged 20 years in 24 hours. He saw Tommy standing beside a modified Jeep, the first prototype Tommy had completed in the 3 months since meeting Sterling. The lieutenant walked over his eyes, taking in the modifications. The reinforced suspension, the twin Vickers machine guns mounted on custom fabricated swivels, the jerry cans secured along both sides. The vehicle looked alien, predatory, nothing like the simple utility transport it had been. "Your Jeep," Lewis said, his Welsh accent thick with exhaustion. "Is it ready?" Tommy hesitated. The vehicle was technically complete, but he had only tested it on short runs around Cairo. No long-distance trials, no combat validation, no certainty it would not break down after 50 miles. "It is a prototype," Tommy said carefully. "Untested. It might. Does it work?" "On paper, in theory." "How fast?" "I achieved 48 miles per hour on the test track. But that is not sand that is not loaded with ammunition and fuel that is not—" Lewis cut him off with a gesture. "Faster than any German vehicle." "Yes." "Then it is not a prototype, McLeod. It is our future." The lieutenant placed his hand on the Jeep's hood, his bloodshot eyes meeting Tommy's. "We were sitting ducks out there, no mobility, just waiting to be killed or captured." "Your Jeep? If we had these, we could have driven to the targets. We could have escaped when things went wrong. We could have controlled when and how we engaged." Lewis paused, his jaw tightening. 22 men died tonight because we could not move fast enough. Do not let that number grow." 2 days later, David Sterling made the decision that would define the Special Air Service for the rest of the war. He walked into General Auchinleck's office and formally requested abandonment of parachute operations in favor of vehicle-based raids. The general was skeptical. Vehicles could not penetrate deep into enemy territory. They were too visible, too noisy, too vulnerable to air attack. The whole concept violated established doctrine. Sterling presented Tommy's calculations. Speed, range, firepower. The mathematics were undeniable. A Jeep raid could reach targets that would require an entire battalion using conventional methods at 1/10 the cost and 1/5 the risk. Auchinleck approved an experimental program. 6 Jeeps, 1 chance to prove the concept. Tommy had 4 weeks to transform theory into reality. Major Reginald Thornton represented everything Tommy hated about military bureaucracy. The man was 50 years old, career Army, a specialist in logistics, who believed wars were won through proper accounting and adherence to regulations. He sat behind a desk in the Cairo supply office, surrounded by filing cabinets that contained documentation for every nail bolt and gasket in North Africa. Tommy sat across from him, trying to maintain his composure while presenting his requisition list. 8 jerry cans per vehicle, Thornton read aloud, his voice dripping with skepticism. 12 Vickers K machine guns, heavy-duty suspension components from Australian suppliers, reinforced chassis plates, custom fabricated weapons mounts. The major looked up, his expression suggesting Tommy had just requested the crown jewels. "Sergeant, these weapons are allocated for aircraft, not ground vehicles. The suspension components would take 4 months to ship from Australia. The chassis modifications you are proposing would require workshop time that is already committed to maintaining actual combat vehicles. Thornton set down the requisition. Request denied. Tommy had expected this. He had prepared for it, but that did not make the frustration any easier to control. Sir, with respect, I am trying to build vehicles that can reach targets conventional forces cannot. If we can disrupt German airfields, we can reduce bombing raids on our own positions. We can destroy supplies before they reach the front lines. You can waste valuable resources on an untested concept that will likely get good men killed for no strategic gain. Thornton's voice hardened. I have reviewed Lieutenant Sterling's proposal. It is to be blunt fantasy. Light vehicles cannot penetrate 200 miles behind enemy lines. They cannot survive desert conditions for multi-day operations. They certainly cannot engage hardened targets and escape. You are asking me to divert critical resources to support a suicide mission. The mathematics show, mathematics are not reality, Sergeant. I have 30 years of military experience. I know what works and what does not. And this, Thornton tapped the requisition with one finger, does not work. Tommy left the office empty-handed. He stood outside in the Cairo heat, watching supply trucks move through the depot, carrying equipment to units that would use it in conventional approved, properly documented ways that would achieve conventional limited, properly documented results. Andrew had died conventionally, following doctrine, moving at approved speeds. Tommy went back to the motor pool and began making phone calls. Corporal William Hughes was Australian, 32 years old, formerly a driver for outback rally teams that competed across some of the harshest terrain on Earth. He had been assigned to the long-range desert group, where his knowledge of desert navigation and vehicle recovery had made him invaluable. He was also, Tommy discovered, a man who understood that official channels were often the slowest path to getting things done. You need suspension components. Hughes spoke with the laconic drawl of someone for whom urgency was a relative concept. I know a bloke in Sydney who builds racing springs. Ship them as personal effects, nobody asks questions. Take 3 weeks instead of 4 months. And the Vickers guns. RAF squadron at Heliopolis has a dozen in storage. They are replacing them with newer models. I fixed their maintenance officer's personal vehicle last month. He owes me. The jerry cans, Hughes grinned. Funny story. We captured a German supply depot last month. Their jerry cans are actually better designed than ours. We have about 200 of them sitting in a warehouse because nobody has filed the right paperwork to redistribute captured equipment. Within a week, Tommy had acquired everything on his requisition list without a single official approval. The springs arrived from Australia marked as personal sporting equipment. The Vickers guns came from the RAF, transferred through a trade that involved Tommy spending 3 nights tuning the aircraft engines of an entire squadron. The jerry cans were simply taken from the captured equipment warehouse by long-range desert group drivers who did not ask permission because nobody had specifically told them not to. Major Thornton never knew. His records showed the requisition as denied. Reality, as Tommy was learning, operated on different rules. The workshop became Tommy's entire world. He worked 18-hour days, sleeping on a cot beside the Jeeps, waking when his internal clock said it was time to check torque specifications or verify alignment measurements. Other mechanics rotated through, helping with basic tasks, but the critical work Tommy did himself. He could not trust anyone else to get it right. The suspension modification alone took 6 days per vehicle. Remove stock springs, install racing-grade components, reinforce mounting points, test under load, and adjust until the mathematics of weight distribution matched his calculations. The weapons mounting systems required custom fabrication, welding brackets that could absorb the vibration of sustained automatic fire while maintaining the structural integrity needed for high-speed cross-country travel. Jock Lewis stopped by the third night, unable to sleep, drawn by the sound of welding torches in the glow of work lights. He watched Tommy for 20 minutes before speaking. You have not slept. Sleep when it is done. You cannot build these if you collapse from exhaustion. Tommy did not look up from the bracket he was fabricating, his hands steady despite 72 hours of continuous work. I can sleep when Andrew is alive again. Until then, I work. Lewis was quiet for a moment. Then, who is Andrew? My brother. He died at Dunkirk because British trucks could not outrun German tanks. He died slowly, Lewis. Not from bullets, from being too slow. The welding torch went silent. Tommy removed his mask, his face streaked with sweat and metal dust. Every hour I spend sleeping is an hour some other brother is slower than he needs to be. I will not have that on my conscience. Lewis nodded slowly. He did not argue. He simply pulled up a stool and began organizing parts, helping in silence, understanding that some men process grief through work and that the best thing you could offer was steady hands. They worked until dawn when the first test jeep was finally complete. December 10th, 1941, Egyptian desert 40 miles west of Cairo. The jeep sat at the edge of a measured course Tommy had marked with stakes driven into hard-packed sand. 3 miles long, incorporating soft dunes, rocky patches, and hard-pan sections that approximated the variety of terrain they would encounter on actual raids. David Sterling stood beside the vehicle, one hand resting on the twin Vickers guns, his expression unreadable. Jock Lewis occupied the passenger seat, notebook ready to record performance data. William Hughes leaned against the hood, checking tire pressures one final time. Tommy sat behind the wheel, both hands gripping the steering wheel, feeling the weight of 3 months' work concentrated into this single moment. If the Jeep failed, the program died. If it succeeded, they had a chance. "Whenever you are ready, McLeod," Sterling said quietly. Tommy turned the ignition. The engine caught, immediately settling into a smooth idle that spoke of proper tuning and careful assembly. He had rebuilt this engine twice, replacing components, optimizing tolerances, ensuring every moving part operated within exact specifications. First gear, gentle acceleration across flat ground, feeling how the modified suspension responded to weight transfer. The ride was firmer than stock, but controlled. The vehicle did not wallow or bounce. It tracked straight, responding to steering inputs with precision. Second gear, approaching the first dune at 20 miles per hour, feeling the front end lift as they climbed. The modified springs compressed evenly, absorbing the slope without bottoming out. Over the crest, accelerating down the far side, the Jeep remained stable and planted. Third gear, 35 miles per hour across mixed terrain, the engine note rising, everything working in harmony. Tommy could feel the vehicle beneath him, each component doing exactly what the mathematics predicted. The power delivery smooth and linear, the suspension articulation perfect, the weight distribution optimal. Fourth gear, 40 miles per hour on hard pack, faster than any British vehicle should manage in desert conditions. The Jeep felt alive, eager, completely unlike the cautious transport it had been designed to be. Tommy saw a section of soft sand ahead, the kind that stopped standard vehicles cold. He had calculated that with modified suspension and reduced ground pressure from optimized tire inflation, they could maintain speed even in conditions that would strand conventional trucks. 42 miles per hour into soft sand. The Jeep slowed but did not bog down. 40 miles per hour sustained. 38, 36. Then as they reached harder ground beyond, accelerating again. 40, 45. Lewis was writing frantically in his notebook, recording speeds and observations. Sterling had stopped watching the speedometer and was simply staring ahead at the desert, his mind clearly somewhere far beyond this test course. Tommy pushed the accelerator to the floor. Fourth gear, engine at maximum revolutions, every component operating at design limits. The speedometer climbed past 45, past 48, touched 50, then 52 miles per hour. 52 miles per hour across desert terrain where German vehicles struggled to maintain 25. Tommy lifted his foot, letting the Jeep decelerate naturally, feeling the brakes as they slowed further, testing every system. Everything worked. Everything held together. Everything exceeded his most optimistic projections. He brought the vehicle to a stop at the end of the course and killed the engine. The silence felt profound after the mechanical symphony of the test run. Sterling climbed out slowly, his movements careful, his face unreadable. He walked around the Jeep, examining it from every angle, running his hand along the jerry cans, the weapons mounts, the reinforced chassis. Finally, he looked at Tommy. "When can you have 6 ready?" 2 weeks, perhaps 3 if we encounter complications. "You have 10 days. We raid on the 20th. Lewis spoke up from the passenger seat, his Welsh accent thoughtful. "You are not building a car, are you, McLeod? You are building a doctrine." Tommy considered that. For 3 months he had thought of this as engineering, solving problems through mathematics and fabrication, making metal move faster because speed saved lives. But Lewis was right. Speed was not just a feature. It was the weapon itself. The ability to appear before the enemy could react, to strike before they could organize defense, to disappear before pursuit could form. They were not fast scouts. They were ghosts that the Germans could not catch because the Germans moved in a world bound by conventional speeds. Every mile per hour, Tommy said quietly, is a life saved. Or, Sterling added his voice carrying absolute conviction, a weapon delivered. McLeod, what you have built here changes everything. The desert is not an obstacle anymore. It is an ocean, and we just built the fastest boat in North Africa. They drove back to Cairo in silence, each man processing what the test meant. Hughes was grinning, already planning how to replicate the modifications across 6 vehicles. Lewis was filling his notebook with tactical considerations, thinking through how to employ this new capability. Sterling stared at the horizon, his mind clearly racing ahead to targets and operations and possibilities. Tommy drove, listening to the engine, feeling every vibration through the steering wheel, monitoring gauges with the automatic attention of someone for whom mechanical perfection was not optional, but essential. Somewhere in Germany, Field Marshal Rommel was planning his next offensive. Somewhere in the Libyan desert, German airfields sat secure, confident that British forces could not reach them. Somewhere in the vast emptiness of North Africa, the mathematics of warfare were about to change. 10 days, 6 jeeps. Then they would see if ghosts could kill. December 20th, 1941. 2 a.m. desert south of Sirte, Libya. 3 jeeps sat in darkness, 500 yards from a German airfield, engines idling in near silence, crews checking weapons with the mechanical efficiency of men who had rehearsed this moment until it lived in muscle memory. Tommy drove the lead vehicle, his hands steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline singing in his veins. This was different from test runs in Egypt, different from workshop trials. This was real metal and real bullets and real Germans who would very much like to kill them. David Sterling occupied the commander position, standing behind the twin Vickers, his hands resting on the guns. Jock Lewis sat in the rear, surrounded by thermite grenades and spare ammunition drums. William Hughes drove the second jeep 50 yards to their right. Lieutenant Carroll Younger commanded the third position 50 yards left. 12 men total, 3 vehicles. One target, 14 Stuka dive bombers parked in neat rows, resting between missions, completely unaware that the impossible was about to arrive. The approach had taken 17 hours, 180 miles across trackless desert, navigating by sun compass during day and star charts at night. They had averaged 38 miles per hour, a speed that still made Tommy shake his head in disbelief. 17 hours to cover a distance that should have required 3 days by conventional transport. The jeeps performed perfectly. Not a single mechanical failure. Not a breakdown. Not an overheating engine. Not a broken spring. Every component Tommy had obsessed over, every bolt he had torqued to exact specification, every modification he had triple-checked, all of it working in perfect harmony. But the real test was about to begin. Sterling checked his watch. 2:15 a.m. exactly. He looked at Tommy and nodded. Tommy released the clutch and accelerated smoothly, keeping the engine note low, approaching the airfield at 20 miles per hour. The other 2 jeeps matched his speed, maintaining formation, moving through darkness like sharks approaching prey. 200 yards from the perimeter, the German guards were visible now, silhouettes against the faint glow of the airfield lights. 2 men both looking the wrong direction, convinced that threats came from the north, where British lines held position 150 miles away. 100 yards. Tommy could see individual aircraft clearly. Stukas with their distinctive inverted gull wings, arranged wingtip to wingtip in 3 rows. A fuel dump sat to the right, jerry cans stacked in careful pyramids. To the left, a maintenance tent glowed with electric light. 50 yards. A German guard turned their direction, his posture shifting from bored to alert. He raised his rifle, shouting something in German that the wind carried away. Too late. Tommy dropped the accelerator to the floor. The jeep surged forward, going from 20 to 40 miles per hour in seconds. Sterling opened fire with the twin Vickers, the sound like tearing canvas amplified 1,000 times. Every 5th round was tracer, creating streams of fire that arced into the parked aircraft. The world became chaos and noise and fire. Tommy focused on driving, his entire existence narrowed to steering inputs and throttle control. Dodge left around a fuel drum, accelerate past a maintenance vehicle, swerve right to give Sterling a clear field of fire at the second row of aircraft. The twin Vickers poured 1,900 rounds per minute into targets that could not fight back. Tracers found fuel tanks, and the first Stuka ignited with a hollow whoomp that shook the air. Lewis was throwing thermite grenades, his aim perfect even from a moving vehicle. Each grenade landed stuck, burned through aircraft skin and internal fuel tanks with white-hot intensity. 45 miles per hour through the middle of a German airfield, 3 jeeps in line abreast, machine guns creating walls of fire, thermite creating pools of light. Germans were shooting back now, but their aim was wild panicked, firing at vehicles that moved faster than their training had prepared them for. A bullet punched through the windscreen 6 inches from Tommy's head. He did not flinch, did not slow, did not deviate, just kept driving, kept the speed constant, gave Sterling and Lewis the stable platform they needed to destroy aircraft. The fuel dump exploded, not from a direct hit, but from sparks carried on the wind. 5,000 gallons of aviation fuel detonating in a fireball that lit the entire airfield brighter than daylight. The shockwave hit the Jeep like a physical blow, rocking the suspension, but Tommy compensated, kept them stable, kept them moving. And then they were through. Past the airfield, accelerating into empty desert, leaving behind a scene of absolute destruction. Behind them, both other Jeeps emerged from the smoke, all guns firing, until they cleared the perimeter and the targets disappeared behind terrain. Tommy checked his mirror. Flames reached 100 feet into the sky. Secondary explosions as ammunition cooked off. The steady crackle of burning aircraft. Sterling's voice cut through the engine noise, calm and precise. All vehicles withdraw south. Rally point Alpha. Go. Tommy turned the wheel, orienting by compass, pushing speed to 50 miles per hour across open desert. Navigation by stars, now the North Star, off the left side Orion rising in the east. Behind them, they could hear German vehicles starting up, attempting pursuit. But pursuit required catching them first. After 15 minutes, Tommy slowed enough to listen. No engine sounds except their own. No sign of pursuit. The Germans had tried, certainly, but their Kubelwagens could not maintain 30 miles per hour in these conditions, and Tommy was holding 50. They were not running away. They were simply choosing to leave, like ghosts. At 3 a.m., they reached Rally Point Alpha, a dry stream bed 20 miles south of the airfield. All 3 Jeeps arrived within 5 minutes of each other. No casualties. No mechanical failures. Every vehicle operational and ready for the return journey. Sterling gathered the crews together, his face still streaked with dust and gunpowder residue. He did not smile, did not congratulate them, just spoke with quiet intensity. Confirmed 14 Stukas destroyed or damaged beyond repair. German fuel reserve eliminated. 0 friendly casualties. Total engagement time 4 minutes 37 seconds. He paused, letting that sink in. 4 minutes to destroy what would have taken a battalion days to reach. This is not a success. This is a revolution. Tommy stood beside his Jeep, one hand resting on the hood, feeling the metal still warm from the engine's exertion. Every gauge had remained in optimal range throughout the raid. Every mechanical component had performed exactly as designed. The mathematics had been proven in fire and bullets and high-speed turns. Hughes walked over, grinning ear to ear. Your Jeep is Magic McLeod. Pure bloody magic. Not magic, Tommy said quietly. Just engineering. But even as he said it, he knew it was more than that. Engineering was the how. But the why, the purpose that drove every calculation in every late night, in every perfect torque specification that came from somewhere else. That came from Andrew, who died too slowly. That came from all the brothers who might live if metal moved fast enough. Jock Lewis appeared beside them, his notebook out, already documenting the raid for future reference. The Germans will respond, he said thoughtfully. They will increase security at airfields. They will try to predict our targets. They will attempt to intercept us. Let them try, Sterling said, walking over to join the conversation. We are faster. We can hit 10 targets and they cannot defend them all. We can strike tonight in the west and tomorrow in the east, and they cannot predict where we will appear next. He looked at Tommy directly. You built the weapon, McLeod. Now we are going to teach the British Army how to use it. How many more Jeeps can you produce? Tommy did the mathematics. Workshop capacity, parts availability, trained mechanics. 20 by March, 40 by June if we expand operations. Do it. And McLeod, Sterling's expression softened slightly. Thank you. For every bolt you torqued, every specification you triple-checked, every night you did not sleep. 22 men died in November because we were too slow. Tonight, 12 men lived because we were fast enough. Remember that when the work gets hard. They left at dawn, 3 jeeps heading back across 180 miles of empty desert, carrying news that would change how the British fought in North Africa. Behind them, German crews were still fighting fires, still counting losses, still trying to understand what had happened. In Tobruk, Oberleutnant Klaus Weber would read the after-action reports with growing concern. Vehicles of unknown type, speed impossible for existing British equipment, firepower exceeding anything in the German intelligence assessments. In Cairo, Major Thornton would continue denying requisitions and filing proper paperwork and believing that wars were won through regulations. And in his workshop, Tommy would return to building ghosts, one perfect bolt at a time, racing against a deadline that measured itself in lives. December 27th, 1 week after the Sirte raid, Jock Lewis was killed when his long-range Desert Group patrol was hit by German aircraft. The Welshman died from wounds sustained in the attack, the first man Tommy had worked closely with to fall in combat. Tommy attended the simple funeral, standing silent among the assembled soldiers, holding a wrench in his pocket because he did not know what else to do with his hands. When they lowered Lewis into the ground, Tommy made a promise. Every mile per hour, every bolt torqued perfect, every modification that bought men an extra second of speed. For Jock, for Andrew, for all the brothers who deserved to be faster than death. The work continued. The ghost grew faster. And somewhere in the German High Command, Field Marshal Rommel was beginning to understand that the British had invented something new. Something he could not catch. Something built by a Scottish mechanic who understood that slow metal killed people and fast metal saved them. The revolution had begun. January 15th, 1942. German intelligence headquarters, Tobruk, Libya. Oberleutnant Klaus Weber spread 14 reconnaissance photographs across his desk, each one showing the same scene from different angles. Sirte Airfield photographed at dawn on December 21st. What remained of Sirte Airfield? 14 Stukas reduced to blackened skeletons. A fuel depot that had contained 5,000 gallons, now just a crater surrounded by scorched earth. Tire tracks in the sand photographed before the wind erased them, showing where vehicles had approached at high speed, maneuvered through the airfield, then departed along 3 different vectors. Weber had been a mechanical engineer before the war, designing automotive components for Mercedes-Benz in Stuttgart. He understood vehicles the way other men understood poetry or music. These tire tracks spoke to him in a language of physics and capability that made his professional instincts scream impossible. The track width suggested light vehicles, probably American Jeeps based on the distinctive tread pattern, but the depth and spacing indicated speeds no Jeep should achieve in desert sand. Weber had calculated the approach speed at 40 to 50 miles per hour based on the distance between tracks and the angle of turn marks. Impossible. American Jeeps maxed out at 20 miles per hour in these conditions. German intelligence files were explicit about this. Except the evidence said otherwise. A knock at his door. Hauptmann Friedrich Müller entered carrying another file folder, to his expression grim. Bars Airfield, last night. 27 aircraft destroyed. Same pattern. Fast vehicles, heavy machine guns in and out before we could respond. Weber took the file, knowing what he would find before opening it. More tire tracks, more impossible speeds, more evidence that the British had developed something new and were using it with devastating effectiveness. How many raids total? 7 in the past 3 weeks. Aja Dabia, Marble Arch, Bar Spanina, Tamimi, Martuba, and Derna. Combined losses: 130 aircraft destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Fuel reserves depleted. Supply convoys harassed. Mueller paused. Field Marshal Rommel has asked for your assessment. Weber stood and walked to the map on his wall, marked with pins showing each raid location. The pattern was clear. The British were not hitting targets randomly. They were systematically destroying Luftwaffe assets across a 200-mile front, using vehicles that could penetrate deep, strike hard, and vanish before pursuit could form. They have modified American Jeeps, Weber said, thinking aloud. Upgraded suspension for desert conditions. Additional fuel capacity for extended range. Heavy weapons mounted on custom fabrications. And someone somewhere in Cairo has optimized the power delivery and weight distribution to achieve speeds we thought impossible. How do we stop them? Weber stared at the map. 7 raids, 7 different locations. No pattern to predict the next target. No way to defend everywhere simultaneously. We cannot stop them, he said quietly. Not yet. First, we have to understand them. I need to examine one of these vehicles. I need to see the modifications, understand the engineering philosophy. He turned to Mueller. Whoever built these is not just a mechanic. He is thinking differently about desert warfare. Speed as a weapon, not just a capability, until we understand that thinking we are fighting blind. In Cairo, Tommy McLeod had no idea he had acquired a professional admirer. He was too busy building more ghosts. The workshop had grown. What started as Tommy working alone in a locked depot had expanded into a dedicated modification facility, employing 15 mechanics operating around the clock. They worked in organized chaos, each station handling a specific aspect of the conversion process. Station 1, suspension replacement. 2 mechanics would strip the stock, springs and shocks, install the heavy-duty racing components Tommy had sourced from Australia, reinforce mounting points, in test articulation under load. Average time 2 days per vehicle. Station 2, weapons mounting. The custom fabrications that Tommy had designed were now being replicated by 3 welders working from his detailed specifications. Each bracket had to absorb sustained vibration from automatic weapons fire while maintaining structural integrity during high-speed cross-country travel. Average time 1 day per vehicle. Station 3, fuel system expansion. Jerry-can racks welded to the chassis position to distribute weight optimally. Additional fuel lines run and tested for leaks. Capacity expanded from 11 gallons to 51. Average time 1 day per vehicle. Station 4, final assembly and testing. Tommy personally handled this stage, refusing to delegate the critical validation that ensured every vehicle met his standards. Engine tuning, brake verification, alignment adjustment, road testing. Average time 1 day per vehicle, sometimes 2, if he found anything that did not meet specifications. Total production time 5 days per Jeep, down from the 3 weeks it had taken to build the first prototype. By January, they had 12 modified Jeeps operational. Tommy had established a numbering system for maintenance tracking. Jeep number 1 through 6 were the original Cairo prototypes built in December 1941. Jeeps 7 through 12 came online in January from the expanded workshop program. By March 25, Jeeps carried sequential numbers. By May 42, each one built to identical specifications, each one capable of 45 to 50 miles per hour in desert conditions, each one mounting enough firepower to destroy an entire squadron of aircraft in minutes. But the human cost of innovation was becoming apparent. Lieutenant James Blackwood arrived at the workshop in late January, fresh from Oxford, where he had been studying literature before the war interrupted his plans to become a poet. He was 22 years old, aristocratic in bearing, with the kind of refined accent that suggested expensive schools and proper upbringing. The Special Air Service recruited from across the British military, seeking men with specific skills, navigation, marksmanship, mechanical aptitude, and the mental toughness for operations deep behind enemy lines. Blackwood had none of those skills. What he had was languages. He spoke German, Italian, and Arabic fluently, which made him valuable for intelligence gathering. What he also had was an absolutely lethal ability with a rifle, which made him valuable for everything else. He walked into Tommy's workshop with the casual confidence of someone who had never experienced serious consequences, looked at the modified Jeeps, and made the worst possible first impression. So these are the famous war wagons. They look rather improvised. Tommy was under a Jeep at the time, checking the torque on differential bolts covered in grease and exhaustion. He rolled out from under the vehicle and stood taking in this well-dressed officer who had apparently never touched a wrench in his life. "They are optimized," Tommy said coldly. "There is a difference." "Of course, I meant no offense." Blackwood smiled with the easy charm of someone accustomed to being forgiven. "James Blackwood, I have been assigned to your next raid. Thought I should meet the man who builds miracles from metal." "They are not miracles. They are engineering." "Ah, but engineering that saves lives, that sounds rather miraculous to me." Tommy did not have time for philosophy. He had 6 Jeeps that needed completion before the next operation, and this Oxford-educated officer was standing in his workspace making observations about things he did not understand. If you are here to help, grab a wrench. If you are here to talk, go somewhere else. Blackwood's smile faded slightly. You are rather serious about nuts and bolts, are you not? It is just a vehicle. Something cold settled in Tommy's chest. Just a vehicle. As if the hundreds of hours of work, the countless nights without sleep, the obsessive attention to every detail were about transportation rather than survival. Those nuts and bolts keep you alive, Tommy said quietly. Everyone torqued to exact specification. Every component tested and validated. You treat this like a vehicle, you die like someone who did not take it seriously. He turned back to his work, dismissing the lieutenant. Blackwood stood there for a moment, clearly unused to being dismissed, then walked away without another word. They would meet again. And the next meeting would be very different. March 14, 1942. Desert south of Benina. The raid had gone perfectly. 9 aircraft destroyed fuel dump, eliminated 0 casualties. But on the return journey, Blackwood's Jeep developed a rhythmic knock in the engine that grew steadily worse until the vehicle finally quit entirely 30 miles from base. Tommy's Jeep was 500 yards ahead when the radio call came through. He turned around and drove back to find Blackwood and his crew standing beside a vehicle that had overheated, catastrophically coolant spraying from a cracked cylinder head. The diagnosis was immediate and bad. Complete engine failure. Not something that could be fixed with field repairs. Standard procedure was to scuttle the vehicle and redistribute the crew. Burn it so the Germans could not examine the modifications, then continue home in the remaining Jeeps. Tommy spent 45 seconds considering that option, then dismissed it. We repair it. William Hughes looked at him like he had lost his mind. Tommy, that is a 4-hour job minimum. In daylight, with German patrols potentially in the area. Then we better start now. Blackwood stepped forward, his Oxford accent losing some of its polish. McLeod, I appreciate the sentiment, but Hughes is right. Leave the Jeep. We can make it back in yours. Tommy was already pulling tools from his repair kit, laying them out in organized rows on the sand. I built this vehicle. It does not quit. I do not quit. We could die out here. Then we die trying. Now you can help or you can watch, but I am fixing this engine. For a moment, Blackwood just stared. Then slowly he knelt beside Tommy. What do you need me to do? What followed was 4 hours of brutal work and temperature that climbed past 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Tommy directed Blackwood, assisted learning through repetition the exact sequence of steps required to replace a cylinder head in field conditions. Hand me the 10mm socket. Blackwood grabbed the wrong one. Tommy corrected him patiently. 10mm, not half-inch. Precision matters. They look the same. They are not the same. One fits, one does not. In engineering, close enough gets people killed. Slowly, through hours of repetition, Blackwood began to understand. This was not about being obsessive or pedantic. This was about the fundamental truth that machinery operated according to exact specifications, and deviation from those specifications created failure, and failure in combat meant death. When the repair was finally complete and the engine started smoothly, Blackwood sat back in the sand covered in oil and sweat, looking at his hands like he had never seen them before. You do this for every vehicle, every time. Why the Army has mechanics, you could delegate. Tommy was repacking his tools, organizing them with the same precision he applied to everything. Because when that engine fails, it is not some anonymous mechanic's fault. It is mine. Those are my brothers in these Jeeps. I will not trust their lives to someone who thinks close enough is acceptable. Blackwood was quiet for a long time. Then I owe you an apology. Back in Cairo, when I said it was just a vehicle, I did not understand. Now you do. Yes. Blackwood pulled out a small notebook from his jacket, the kind used for writing poetry. May I ask you something? Why do you care so much beyond duty, beyond the obvious reasons? What drives this? Tommy considered not answering. But something about sitting in the desert covered in shared oil, having just completed shared work, made honesty easier. My brother died at Dunkirk. Not from bullets, from being too slow. German tanks caught his unit on a road, and there was nowhere to go because British trucks could not outrun panzers. Tommy closed his toolkit with quiet precision. Every mile per hour I add to these vehicles is a chance some other brother does not die the same way. That is what drives this. Blackwood wrote something in his notebook. May I read you something? If you must. The lieutenant's voice changed, taking on a rhythm that spoke of careful composition. We are the ghosts that Rommel cannot catch. 50 miles per hour faster than death. The desert keeps our speed, the stars our path. And when I fall, the jeeps will race ahead. Tommy looked up sharply. You wrote that? Started it, not finished yet, trying to capture what you have built. Not the machinery, but the idea behind it. Speed as salvation. Engineering as prayer. It is not prayer, it is mathematics. Mathematics in service of keeping men alive. That sounds rather like prayer to me. Blackwood smiled, but it was different from the casual charm he had displayed in Cairo. This was something more genuine. Thank you, McLeod, for not leaving the Jeep, for teaching me precision, for showing me that details matter. They drove back to base in formation, both vehicles operational, arriving just after sunset. Tommy went immediately to his workshop to begin maintenance on all vehicles from the raid. Blackwood went to his quarters and continued writing, trying to find words that could express what he had learned about the relationship between perfect torque specifications and human survival. They would become friends, not through shared background or common interests, but through the bond of men who understood that attention to detail was not obsession, but love expressed in the only language that mattered, when metal met sand at high speed. May 19, 1942, Cairo SAS headquarters. David Sterling stood before a wall map of North Africa, one hand resting on a point marked Benghazi. Behind him, assembled crews from 18 jeeps sat in folding chairs, waiting for the briefing that would define the most ambitious raid yet attempted. Gentlemen, we are going to sail across an ocean. He tapped the map. Benghazi Harbor, 300 miles behind German lines. Intelligence confirms multiple cargo ships docked, carrying supplies for Rommel's planned offensive. Our mission: destroy that shipping. Our timeline: 6 days out, 1 night of attack, 6 days back. A murmur ran through the assembled men. 300 miles was beyond anything they had attempted. The deepest previous raid had been 180. I know what you are thinking. The distance is extreme. The risk is substantial. One mechanical failure, one navigation error, one piece of bad luck, and we are stranded in the deepest part of enemy territory with no support and no extraction. Sterling paused. But we have something the Germans do not. We have vehicles built by a man who understands that failure is not acceptable. We have speed they cannot match. And we have the element of absolute surprise. He turned to face the assembly. Field Marshal Rommel believes Benghazi is safe because it is unreachable. We are going to prove him wrong. Tommy, mechanical brief. Tommy stood feeling the weight of 47 pairs of eyes. He had spent 3 days personally inspecting every vehicle for this operation. Every bolt torqued. Every fluid level verified. Every system tested under load. 6 days travel across unmapped desert. Vehicles will carry maximum fuel load, 51 gallons each. At optimum cruising speed of 40 miles per hour, that gives us approximately 500-mile range with reserve. We will refuel at Kufra Oasis on day 3. He pointed to the map. Navigation is critical. We are crossing terrain with 0 landmarks. Sergeant Walsh will lead navigation using sun compass and celestial references. 19-year-old Peter Walsh stood looking younger than his age, his New Zealand accent soft but confident. I have plotted the route using LRDG survey data and astronomical tables. If we maintain course accuracy within 5 degrees, we should arrive within 10 miles of target. 10 miles of error across 300 miles of featureless desert. It sounded impossible. But Walsh had a photographic memory for maps and an instinctive understanding of celestial navigation that bordered on supernatural. Sterling continued the briefing, covering attack patterns, withdrawal routes, contingencies. But Tommy was already thinking about the mechanical challenges. 6 days of sustained operation in conditions that would break standard vehicles in hours. Heat exceeding 120 degrees. Sand that infiltrated every mechanism. Vibration that loosened bolts and cracked welds. After the briefing, Blackwood found Tommy in the workshop watching mechanics perform final preparations. Nervous. Concerned. Nervous implies uncertainty. I am certain about the vehicles. Less certain about everything else. Like what happens if we get separated in a sandstorm, or if the Germans have better intelligence than we think, or if one of us does not make it back. Tommy did not answer immediately. Since their shared repair in March, he and Blackwood had developed an unlikely friendship built on mutual respect. The Oxford poet had proven surprisingly capable with mechanical work, often staying late in the workshop to help with modifications while composing verse in his notebook during breaks. "If something happens to me," Tommy said quietly, "the maintenance logs are in the workshop office. Top drawer, every specification, every modification, every lesson learned. Someone else can continue the work. Nothing is going to happen to you. You do not know that." "No." Blackwood pulled out his notebook. "But I know this. If something happens to me, I want you to have this. My poems about the Jeeps, about speed, about what you built. Maybe someday someone will understand that engineering can be beautiful. Poetry is not my area. That is why I want you to have it. Someone should remember that these machines were more than weapons. They were philosophy made metal." Tommy took the notebook, feeling its weight. "Nothing is going to happen to you either. We do not know that." "No, but I built these Jeeps to bring everyone home. Trust the engineering." They shook hands, two men from completely different worlds, united by the understanding that attention to detail was the only prayer that worked in combat. The next morning, June 7th, 1942, 18 Jeeps departed Cairo in three groups, heading southwest toward Kufra Oasis in a date with impossible distance. Day one was deceptively easy. Hard-packed sand, clear skies, navigation straightforward. They covered 120 miles, arriving at a pre-scouted camping position as the sun set. Tommy spent 3 hours after dark inspecting every vehicle, checking oil levels, tire pressures, bolt torques. Everything was perfect. Day two introduced the sand sea, endless dunes that reduced speed to 30 miles per hour and tested the modified suspensions with brutal efficiency. Every vehicle performed exactly as designed, climbing dunes that would have stopped standard Jeeps, maintaining speeds that defied reasonable expectations. They covered 90 miles. Day three brought them to Kufra Oasis at noon, refueling, rest, final systems check before the deepest penetration. Tommy discovered a slight oil leak on Jeep number 9, Blackwood's vehicle. Not critical but concerning. He spent 4 hours replacing a gasket, refusing to continue until the repair met his standards. Blackwood watched the entire process, handing tools, learning, understanding that this obsession was not about perfectionism, but about the mathematics of survival. "Why do you do that?" Blackwood asked at one point. "Do what?" "Check everything twice. We are on schedule. The leak is minor. We could continue." Tommy was torquing bolts to exact specification, his hands steady despite the heat. Because minor becomes major. Major becomes critical. Critical becomes fatal. I have seen it happen. "Your brother?" "My father, brake line, minor leak. He was tired, skipped the check. Trusted it would probably be fine." Tommy set down the wrench with careful precision. "Probably is not a word I use anymore." They departed Kufra at sunset, navigating by stars, Walsh calling out course corrections every 30 minutes with absolute confidence. The desert at night was a different world. Cold instead of hot. Silent instead of wind scoured. The stars so bright they cast shadows. Day four was the test. 140 miles across completely unmapped terrain with 0 reference points. Just Walsh's navigation skill and Tommy's vehicles against emptiness. At hour 6, a sandstorm materialized from nowhere. Not the seasonal haboobs they had planned for, but a freak weather event that reduced visibility to 20 feet and turned the air into an abrasive soup that infiltrated every seal and bearing. "All vehicles halt," Sterling ordered over radio. "Wait it out." But Walsh was insistent. "We cannot stop. Storm could last hours. We will miss our timeline. I know where we are. We can navigate through this." It was a command decision. Trust the 19-year-old New Zealander who claimed he could navigate by feel and instinct, or play it safe and potentially miss the attack window. Sterling made the call. "We continue. Walsh, you better be right about this." For 3 hours, they drove through conditions that should have been impossible. Visibility measured in feet. No visual references. Just Walsh calling out bearing corrections based on wind direction and the faint glow of stars occasionally visible through breaks in the storm. When the storm cleared at sunset, Walsh announced their position. Benghazi, 15 miles north-northeast. Sterling checked the map, then checked it again. They had driven 3 hours blind through a sandstorm, and Walsh had kept them on course to within a fraction of a degree. The mathematical precision was staggering. Tommy drove forward until he was beside Walsh's Jeep. "How did you do that?" The young New Zealander shrugged. "Just math like you said. Wind speed, vehicle drift, elapsed time. Calculate the corrections, trust the numbers." "You are a wizard." "No, just paying attention, like you taught us." Day 5 and 6 were positioning, moving into attack range, finding concealment, conducting final reconnaissance. The Jeeps performed flawlessly. Not a single mechanical failure across 6 days and 287 miles. They hid the vehicles in a wadi 10 miles from Benghazi, covered them with camouflage netting, and rested through the day. Tommy conducted final checks, going vehicle to vehicle, listening to engines, feeling for loose bolts, ensuring everything was ready. That evening, Blackwood found him sitting alone beside Jeep number 1, his hand resting on the hood. "Penny, for your thoughts." "Thinking about the raid. 400 yards of open dock, 18 vehicles moving at 40 miles per hour, 1,000 variables that could go wrong. But they will not. You built these too well." Tommy looked at the poet who had become his friend. "Promise me something. If anything happens, you finish this. Make them so fast they cannot catch ghosts." "Nothing is going to happen to you, you daft mechanic." "Promise anyway." Blackwood smiled, then extended his hand. "I promise. Now you promise me something. If I do not make it back, give my notebook to my sister, Emma Blackwood, Oxford. She should know I tried to capture what you built in words." They shook hands, two men making promises they hoped they would never have to keep. At 2:15 a.m. June 13th, 1942, 18 Jeeps started their engines and began the approach to Benghazi Harbor. Klaus Weber was waiting, though he didn't know it yet. The attack unfolded exactly as planned for the first 7 minutes. 18 Jeeps in perfect formation, separated by 50 yards, approaching at 40 miles per hour. Twin Vickers guns opening fire at 400 yards, creating walls of tracer fire that arced into cargo ships and fuel storage tanks. The sound was apocalyptic, a mechanical thunder that drowned out shouts and alarms. Tommy drove the lead vehicle, his entire world narrowed to steering inputs and throttle control. Dodge left around a dock crane. Accelerate past stacked cargo containers. Swerve right to give Sterling clear field of fire at a cargo vessel. Behind him, 17 other Jeeps executed the same choreographed dance of destruction they had rehearsed in the desert. The first ship ignited at 2:17, as Weber would later note in his report. Aviation fuel spreading across water, creating a lake of fire. The second explosion came when an ammunition transport took a direct hit, shockwave powerful enough to crack windows 300 yards inland. Tommy felt the blast wave hit his Jeep, compensated with steering input, kept them stable and moving. In the passenger position, Sterling was firing controlled bursts, his accuracy terrifying even from a moving platform. Behind them, Jock Lewis's replacement was throwing thermite grenades with the precision of someone who understood ballistics. 7 minutes in, everything was working perfectly. Then the Germans adapted. Weber had not been able to predict where the British would strike next, but he had prepared for the possibility. Hidden machine gun positions pre-positioned to cover the most likely approach routes. Radio-equipped rapid response teams ready to converge on any attack. At -8, a German MG-42 opened fire from a concealed bunker, its 1,100 rounds per minute creating a wall of bullets that caught Jeep number 14 in a devastating crossfire. The vehicle swerved violently, hit a mooring post, flipped. "All units evasive patterns," Sterling called over radio, his voice still calm despite the chaos. "Continue attack." The Jeeps scattered, no longer in neat formation, but still moving, still firing, still destroying targets. The German machine gun found Jeep number 17 punching holes through engine block and radiator. The vehicle kept moving for another 200 yards, then died, crew bailing out and running for cover. -9. 2 Jeeps down. German return fire intensifying. But the raid continued because the fundamental advantage remained unchanged. The Jeeps were still faster than anything the Germans could deploy. They could be damaged, could be disabled, but they could not be caught. -10. The harbor was completely engulfed in fire. 5 ships burning or sinking. Fuel storage facilities detonating in secondary explosions. The mission objectives achieved beyond expectations. "All units withdraw south," Sterling ordered. "Rally point Alpha 30 miles out." The Jeeps disengaged, accelerating to maximum speed, leaving behind a scene of destruction that would be remembered as one of the most devastating raids of the North African campaign. 16 jeeps emerged from the harbor and raced into empty desert. Tommy checked his mirrors. Everyone was accounted for. Some vehicles damaged, some crews wounded, but everyone moving and operational. Then the radio crackled. "This is Alpha 7. Engine failure. Cannot maintain speed. Falling behind." Alpha 7, radio call sign for Jeep number 18, Blackwood's vehicle. The one Tommy had repaired at Kufra, the one with the replaced gasket. Tommy did not hesitate. "Sterling request permission to fall back and assist." "Negative, maintain speed. We have pursuit forming." But Tommy was already slowing, watching in his mirror as Blackwood's Jeep fell farther behind its engine, note changing from smooth power to struggling rasp. Behind Blackwood, visible in the glow of burning Benghazi German vehicles, were starting to organize pursuit. "McLeod, that is an order. Maintain formation." Tommy ignored the order and turned around. He found Blackwood's Jeep 3 miles from the harbor, stopped completely, engine seized from catastrophic failure. The crew was out setting demolition charges to destroy the vehicle before the Germans could examine it. Tommy skidded to a stop beside them. "Get in, we are leaving." "No room," Blackwood said, gesturing to the 4-man crew. "Your Jeep is full. Mathematics do not work." "Then we fix yours." "Tommy, there is no time. The Germans are 5 minutes behind, maybe less." Tommy was already pulling tools from his kit. "Then we work fast. Everyone else go. I will catch up." "I am not leaving you," Blackwood said flatly. The rest of the crew looked between them, understanding the mathematics. 2 jeeps worth of men, 1 operational vehicle. Someone had to stay. William Hughes, the Australian who had taught Tommy to balance precision with practicality, made the decision. "I will stay with you. The rest take McLeod's Jeep. Go." They argued, briefly, but the sound of German engines was getting louder and arguments did not change mathematics. The crew piled into Tommy's Jeep and departed, the driver pushing speed to maximum to rejoin the main force. Tommy and Hughes turned to Blackwood's vehicle tools already in hand. "This is insane," Hughes said. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they arrive." "Then we better work fast." They did not speak after that, just worked with the synchronized efficiency of men who had done this before. Remove damaged components, replace with spares, reconnect, torque test. The mathematical precision of emergency field repair compressed into desperate speed. 8 minutes and the engine turned over. Rough, not perfect, but functional. "That will do," Tommy said. "Get in." They started driving south, the engine protesting, but delivering power. Behind them, German headlights were visible, closing fast. Blackwood was in the back, manning the rear-facing 50 caliber machine gun. "They are gaining. Kubelwagens, maybe 4 of them." "How fast are we going?" Hughes asked. Tommy checked the speedometer. 32, not enough. "Can you get more speed?" "Not without the engine failing completely." The Germans closed to 800 yards. Then 400, well within machine gun range. Blackwood opened fire, long controlled bursts that forced the pursuing vehicles to swerve and slow. But there were 4 of them, and they were faster than Blackwood's damaged Jeep could manage. Tommy's mind raced through options. The engineering calculations that had defined his entire war, trying to find a solution in mathematics and machinery. "Tommy," Blackwood said quietly, "stop the Jeep." "What? Stop, let me out. I will hold them while you and Hughes escape." "Absolutely not. Look at the numbers. This Jeep cannot outrun them, but yours can. You get out, take yours, leave me with this one. I hold them for 10, maybe 15 minutes. You get away." Tommy wanted to argue, wanted to find a flaw in Blackwood's logic, but the mathematics were undeniable. Hughes looked at Tommy, his expression asking the question neither of them wanted to answer. Blackwood made the decision for them. He climbed into the driver's seat, pushing Tommy out of the way. "Go, that is an order, Sergeant. I am not leaving you. You built these to save lives, McLeod, so save yours. Mine is being spent well." Blackwood smiled, that Oxford charm returning one final time. "Besides, someone has to finish my poem." "You promised." The German vehicles were 300 yards away and closing. Tommy climbed out of the Jeep, feeling like his chest was being crushed. Hughes grabbed his arm, pulling him toward Tommy's vehicle, hidden in a nearby depression. The last thing Tommy saw was Blackwood turning the damaged Jeep around, positioning himself between the Germans and The escape route, both hands on the twin Vickers guns, preparing to give them the 15 minutes his friends needed to survive. Tommy and Hughes reached the hidden Jeep, started it, drove south at maximum speed. Behind them, the sound of sustained machine gun fire. Blackwood, buying seconds with bullets, minutes with courage, lives with his own. The firing continued for 14 minutes, then stopped. Tommy drove in silence, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face, his hands gripping the wheel with enough force to turn his knuckles white. They reached Rally Point Alpha that night, reuniting with the main force. 16 Jeeps, 44 men, 1 missing. Sterling met them as they arrived. He did not ask what happened. He just placed one hand on Tommy's shoulder and let him stand there, silent and grieving. The next morning, they began the return journey to Cairo. 6 days across the desert, every mile taking them farther from where Blackwood had died, buying time with his own life. Tommy drove in mechanical silence, his mind locked in the recursive loop of someone who understood that he had built the vehicles to save lives but could not save everyone. In his pocket, Blackwood's notebook, the unfinished poem about ghosts and speed. In his heart, a new lesson. Faster did not mean invincible. Engineering could not solve every problem. Sometimes mathematics led to choices where all answers involved loss. But the work continued because 44 men had survived who might not have without the speed Tommy had built into those Jeeps. Because the mission succeeded despite the cost. Because Blackwood had died believing that what they were doing mattered. When they reached Cairo, Tommy went directly to his workshop. He did not sleep, did not eat, just began upgrading Jeep number 19 with every lesson learned, every improvement conceived, every modification that might buy someone else the seconds Blackwood had bought them. For Jimmy, for Andrew, for all the brothers faster than death and the few deaths still caught anyway. The revolution continued, July 8, 1942, German Vehicle Depot, Tobruk. Klaus Weber stood in the afternoon heat staring at what his intelligence officers had spent 6 weeks trying to capture. Jeep number 18, Blackwood's vehicle. The one that had failed mechanically during the Benghazi withdrawal, the one its crew had been forced to abandon after removing classified equipment and setting incomplete demolition charges. The charges had failed. The Jeep survived, mostly intact. And now Weber finally had what he had sought since December. A chance to understand the engineering philosophy that had transformed American utility vehicles into weapons that haunted German supply lines across 200 miles of desert. He walked around the Jeep, slowly taking detailed notes. The modifications were immediately apparent to someone with his mechanical engineering background. Heavy-duty suspension components replacing stock springs. Custom fabricated weapons mounts that showed sophisticated understanding of vibration dampening and structural load distribution. Jerry-can racks positioned to optimize weight distribution while maximizing fuel capacity. But what struck Weber most was the elegance of it all. German specialty vehicles tended toward comprehensive redesign. Take a platform and rebuild it from scratch for specific purposes. This British approach was different. They had worked within the Jeep's basic architecture, preserving its inherent simplicity and reliability, while dramatically expanding capabilities through careful optimization. Weber knelt beside the front suspension, examining the spring replacement. Racing-grade components, probably Australian-sourced based on the manufacturer markings. The mounting points had been reinforced but not over-engineered. Just enough strength to handle the additional load without adding unnecessary weight. He moved to the weapons mounting system. Twin Vickers machine guns on custom swivels that allowed rapid traverse while maintaining stability during high-speed movement. The fabrication quality was exceptional. Not factory perfect, but showing the hallmarks of a skilled craftsman who understood that field modifications required different standards than assembly line production. Weber pulled out a measuring tape and began documenting everything. Spring rates, mounting bolt sizes, weapons placement angles, fuel tank positioning, every detail that might explain how these vehicles achieve speeds German intelligence had initially dismissed as impossible. After 4 hours of examination, he sat in the driver's seat and closed his eyes, trying to imagine the mind of whoever had built this. The attention to detail suggested someone obsessive about mechanical precision, but the practical adaptation of racing components indicated someone who thought beyond regulations and standard procedures. The weapons integration showed tactical understanding unusual for a mechanic. Herr Oberleutnant, Weber opened his eyes. His assistant stood beside the jeep holding a folder. I have compiled interrogation reports from prisoners captured during various raids. Several mentioned a Scottish sergeant responsible for vehicle modifications. No name obtained, but descriptions are consistent. Skilled mechanic formerly worked on rally cars, apparently quite difficult to work with due to his insistence on extreme precision. Weber smiled despite himself. Of course the man was difficult. Anyone with the skill to build these would have standards that seemed unreasonable to people who did not understand that the difference between 40 miles per hour and 25 was not a matter of preference but of survival. Prepare a full technical report, Weber ordered. Complete specifications, photographs, measurements. Send copies to Berlin and to Field Marshal Rommel's headquarters. He ran his hand along the jeep's hood, feeling the metal still warm from the sun. What I would give, he said quietly, to meet the man who built you. That meeting would come, though not in circumstances either man could have predicted. October 15th, 1942. Forward SAS Base, Burg El Arab, Egypt. Tommy stood beside a map-covered wall in the operations tent looking at 42 pins representing 42 modified jeeps now deployed across the western desert. Each pin was color-coded, green for operational and ready, yellow for operational with minor issues, red for significant mechanical problems requiring depot-level repair. 41 green pins, 1 yellow. In 4 months since Benghazi, the program had expanded beyond anything he had imagined back in July 1941, when David Sterling first asked if a jeep could be made to fly across sand. They now had dedicated workshops in Cairo. In Alexandria, trained mechanics who could perform modifications following Tommy's specifications, supply chains that delivered components without requiring creative requisitioning. He had been promoted to captain, given administrative responsibility for vehicle maintenance across all SAS operations. It meant less time with tools, more time with paperwork. He hated it. But tomorrow night, administrative concerns would not matter. Tomorrow night, 42 jeeps would deploy across a 200-mile front with a single objective: destroy everything German behind the El Alamein defensive lines. General Montgomery was preparing a massive offensive. 14 divisions, over 200,000 men, supported by armor and artillery in concentrations the North African campaign had never seen. But before that offensive launched, the SAS would strike everywhere simultaneously, disrupting communications, destroying fuel dumps, eliminating supply convoys, creating chaos in the German rear areas. It was the largest jeep operation ever planned, and Tommy would not be participating. Sterling had been explicit. You are too valuable to risk in combat anymore, Tommy. We need you alive to keep the vehicles running. Someone else drives tomorrow night. Tommy understood the logic, accepted it intellectually, but emotionally the decision felt like abandonment. 42 crews heading into combat in vehicles he had built while he remained at base listening to radio reports and hoping his engineering was sufficient. Sergeant Peter Walsh entered the tent, his young face showing the strain of planning navigation for simultaneous raids across such a wide front. At 19, he had become the most skilled desert navigator in the British Army, able to guide patrols across trackless waste with errors measured in single-digit miles. Final navigation briefings are complete, Walsh reported. All crews have their routes, timing, and rally points. Weather forecast is favorable. Clear skies, minimal wind. Equipment status. 41 jeeps showing green on final inspections. Jeep number 27 has a minor oil leak. The crew wants to take it anyway. Tommy shook his head. No, minor becomes major. Switch them to the backup vehicle. Sir, the crew specifically requested 27. They have used it on 6 previous raids. They trust it. Then they should trust me when I say the leak is unacceptable. Backup vehicle or they do not go. Walsh hesitated, then nodded. Yes, sir. After the young sergeant left, Tommy walked outside and stood looking at the rows of jeeps being prepared for departure. Mechanics swarmed over each vehicle, conducting final checks, loading ammunition, securing fuel cans. The scene had the organized chaos of an operation that had been rehearsed until every movement was automatic. He found William Hughes supervising fuel loading, the Australian's laconic efficiency unchanged since that first meeting 18 months ago. You should be going with them tomorrow, Hughes said without preamble. These are your jeeps. Orders say otherwise. Orders are sometimes stupid, Hughes gestured at the vehicles. Every bolt in these machines you torqued personally or trained someone's to your standards. Every modification carries your thinking. The crews know that. They trust these Jeeps because they trust you. You should be there. And if I die, who maintains the program? Someone else. Same as if you die sitting at base when a German bomber gets through our air defense. Hughes' expression softened slightly. Look, I understand the logic. I even agree with it mostly, but you have earned the right to see what you built do its work. Just my opinion. Tommy did not answer. He just walked through the motor pool, checking vehicles, listening to engines, feeling for problems that instruments might not detect. Each Jeep represented hundreds of hours of work. Each modification incorporated lessons learned from previous raids. Each component had been selected based on performance data and failure analysis. He had built them to save lives. Tomorrow night, he would discover if he had built them well enough. October 23rd, 1942, 9 p.m. 42 Jeeps departed in 6 groups, each heading toward different targets across the German rear area. Airfields, supply depots, communication stations, fuel dumps. 12 days of continuous operations striking everywhere, giving the Germans no rest and no ability to predict the next attack. Tommy sat in the radio tent, headphones on, listening to fragmentary reports as they came in. The radio operators had orders to maintain communication discipline, keeping transmissions brief and cryptic to avoid German direction finding. But even the limited information painted a picture of controlled chaos. Amber 3, target destroyed, withdrawing. Baker 6, contact with enemy patrol engaging. Charlie 2, mechanical issue, continuing mission. That last one made Tommy's chest tighten. Mechanical issue. Which Jeep? What problem could it be? Field repaired, or would they have to abandon the vehicle? The night stretched endlessly. Reports came in sporadically. Some Jeeps returned by dawn, crews exhausted but successful. Others were still out completing longer range missions or dealing with complications. By noon on day 2, 38 Jeeps had returned. 4 were still operating. By day 3, 40 Jeeps had returned. Jeep number 9 and Jeep number 33 were missing. Day 4 brought confirmation. Jeep 9 had been hit by anti-aircraft fire during a low-level attack on a fuel depot. The vehicle burned completely. Crew status unknown, presumed killed. Jeep 33 had mechanical failure 70 miles behind enemy lines. The crew scuttled the vehicle and attempted to walk back. German patrols captured them. 8 men, 6 dead, 2 captured. The first significant casualties the Jeep program had suffered since Blackwood. Tommy took the news in silence, walking out of the operations tent and standing alone in the desert heat. 8 men who trusted vehicles he had built. 8 men whose survival depended on engineering he had validated. He thought about Jeep number 9. He had personally inspected that vehicle before deployment. Everything met specifications. Every system tested and verified. But something had failed anyway. A bullet finding a critical component or metal fatigue in a part that showed no visible stress or simple bad luck. The uncertainty was worse than knowing. Day 5 through 8 saw the raids continue. More targets destroyed, more supply dumps eliminated, more chaos inflicted on German logistics, but also more casualties. The accounting grew grimmer with each passing day. Day 5, Jeep 14 hit a mine near City Rezeg. Driver and gunner killed instantly, 2 crew wounded critically. Day 6, Jeep 17 and Jeep 33 caught in coordinated air attack at dawn. 4 men killed, vehicles destroyed. Day 7, Jeep 9 ambushed at checkpoint. 2 men killed in firefight, vehicle burned. Day 8, Jeeps 14 and 28 encountered minefield. Mine detonation killed 2 men outright, wounded 7 others, destroyed both vehicles. Day 9, Jeep 22 disabled by engine failure, crew captured attempting to walk out. 4 men missing, presumed POW. Day 10, Jeep 7 took heavy fire during fuel depot raid. 1 man killed, 3 wounded, vehicle limped back, barely operational. Day 11, Jeep 31 flipped during high-speed evasion, rolled 3 times. 2 men killed, gunner paralyzed. Day 12, final raid. Jeep 4 hit by mortar fragment. Driver bled out before reaching medical aid. By day 9, 36 Jeeps remained operational. Tommy stopped sleeping. He spent every hour inspecting returned vehicles, analyzing damage patterns, trying to understand what was failing and why. The mathematical precision that had always governed his work became obsessive recalculation. Could he have reinforced that component? Should fuel tanks be positioned differently? Was the armor plating sufficient? On day 10, David Sterling found him in the workshop at 3 a.m. disassembling a damaged Jeep with hands that shook from exhaustion. "Tommy, you need to rest. Need to understand why number 14 hit that mine." The crew said they saw it, tried to swerve, but the Jeep did not respond fast enough. "I need to know if that was driver error or mechanical limitation or..." Sterling physically took the wrench from Tommy's hand. "Captain McLeod, that is an order. Sleep. 4 hours minimum. Men are dying in my vehicles. Men are surviving in your vehicles. 23 dead in 12 days, Tommy. That is terrible. That is tragedy. But conventional raids would have cost 200 casualties to achieve what we have done. Your Jeep saved 177 lives. You understand that, yes?" Tommy wanted to argue. Wanted to explain that 177 saved did not erase 23 lost. Wanted to say that engineering should be about absolutes, about making machinery so reliable that nobody died from mechanical failure. But he was too tired, too broken by 12 days of listening to casualty reports. He let Sterling guide him to a cot and collapsed into exhausted sleep, where mathematics dissolved into nightmares of Jeeps burning and men screaming and bolts that loosened no matter how perfectly he torqued them. He woke 4 hours later to news that Jeep number 7 had completed the deepest penetration raid of the war, traveling 230 miles to destroy a German ammunition depot, then returning without casualties. The crew reported the Jeep performed flawlessly. Tommy read the report 3 times, trying to understand how to hold both truths simultaneously. 23 men dead, 177 alive, Jeeps that failed catastrophically, and Jeeps that exceeded every specification. On day 12, November 4th, the El Alamein offensive achieved breakthrough. German forces began retreating. The SAS raids had accomplished their objective, disrupting logistics at the critical moment, contributing to the strategic victory that would change the course of the North African campaign. Final accounting of the El Alamein campaign. Completed raids. 43 of 46 planned operations. Aircraft destroyed or damaged. 187 confirmed supply. Disruption estimated 3 weeks of German offensive capability. Eliminated vehicles 9 Jeeps total. Lost 6 damaged, requiring depot-level repair. Personnel casualties. Day 4. Jeep number 9, 4 men. KIA, air attack on fuel depot. Day 6, Jeeps number 17 and number 33. 4 men. KIA coordinated Luftwaffe strafe. Day 7, Jeep number 9, 2 men. KIA checkpoint ambush. Day 8, Jeeps number 14 and number 28. 2 men. KIA 7 WIA minefield. Day 10, Jeep number 22, 4 men. A/P OU engine failure captured to day 11. Jeep number 31, 2 men. KIA vehicle rollover. Day 12, Jeep number 4, a 1-man. KIA mortar fragment, additional 4 men. DOU died of wounds in following week. Total, 23 men killed in action, 17 wounded, 4 missing, presumed captured. Survival rate, 79%. Tommy stood in the motor pool surrounded by 33 returned Jeeps, looking at the empty spaces where 9 vehicles should have been. Fastest did not mean invincible. Engineering could not prevent all deaths. Sometimes the mathematics led to choices where success and tragedy occupied the same moment, but the work continued. Because it had to. Because 23 deaths were terrible, but 200 would have been worse. Because the revolution Tommy had started with a single modified Jeep in Cairo had proven itself in fire and sand and blood. He walked to his workshop and began planning improvements. Reinforced fuel tanks, better mine detection protocols, enhanced armor for crew positions. Every lesson learned, the written-in casualties, translated into modifications that might save the next brother. For Jimmy, for Andrew, for Jock, for the 23, for the 177 still alive. The mathematics of war were brutal, but they were still mathematics. And Tommy still believed that precision engineering applied with obsessive attention to detail could shift the equations towards survival. One perfect bolt at a time. April 27, 1943. British POW interrogation facility outside Tunis. Klaus Weber sat in a sparse room wearing the uniform of a defeated army waiting to be questioned by British intelligence. The Africa Corps had surrendered 3 days ago. The North African campaign was over. Germany had lost. He expected the interrogation to focus on military intelligence, troop dispositions, defensive preparations, the locations of remaining German forces in Europe, standard procedure for captured officers. Instead, the British officer who entered the room carried a folder containing technical specifications and a photograph of Jeep number 18. Oberleutnant Weber, my name is Captain Richardson, Royal Engineers. I understand you have taken considerable interest in our vehicle modifications. Weber smiled despite the circumstances. Your vehicles have been the subject of professional fascination for 18 months. Whoever designed those modifications is a genius. Would you be willing to discuss your findings? Your technical analysis. It was an unusual request, but Weber saw no military value in technical specifications that the British obviously already possessed. And professionally, the opportunity to discuss engineering with people who might understand was too compelling to refuse. I examined the captured vehicle extensively. The suspension modifications were brilliant, not over-engineered, just optimized for desert conditions. The weapons mounting showed sophisticated understanding of vibration and structural loads. But what impressed me most was the philosophy. Richardson raised an eyebrow. Philosophy. German specialty vehicles emphasize comprehensive redesign. Your approach was different. Work within the existing platform, preserve reliability, add capability through intelligent optimization. It is more elegant, more practical. Weber paused. I wrote a report recommending we adopt similar methodology. It was never implemented. We lacked resources and time. Would you be willing to put your analysis in writing, technical details, design philosophy recommendations? For what purpose? Professional development. Understanding how our enemies viewed our capabilities helps us improve them. Weber considered this. It violated no military secrecy to discuss British technology with British engineers. And professionally, the idea that his analysis might contribute to further development of the vehicles was appealing. On one condition, I would like to meet the man who built them, the mechanic your prisoners mentioned. Professional curiosity. Richardson was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I will see what can be arranged. 3 days later, Tommy McLeod sat in the same room looking at a German officer who had spent 18 months hunting the Jeeps Tommy built. Weber stood when Tommy entered, offering a formal nod. Captain McLeod, I have looked forward to this meeting, though I did not imagine it would occur under these circumstances. Tommy did not return the courtesy. This man had tried to kill his brothers, had analyzed the Jeeps looking for weaknesses, had been part of the machinery that killed Andrew and Blackwood in the 23. You wanted to meet me. I am here. Say what you need to say. Weber gestured to a folder on the table. My technical analysis of your modifications. Complete specifications, photographs, recommendations. Captain Richardson requested it for your engineering archives. Tommy opened the folder, page after page of detailed technical drawings, measurements, observations. The quality of analysis was exceptional. Weber had understood not just what Tommy had done, but why. The engineering philosophy, the balance between strength and weight, the prioritization of reliability over maximum performance. You studied these thoroughly. For 18 months, your vehicles were the weapon I could not counter, fast enough to appear anywhere, lethal enough to destroy strategic targets, gone before we could respond. It was professionally frustrating. Weber smiled slightly. Also professionally admirable. We were trying to kill you. Yes, and we were trying to kill you. This is war, but respect for an enemy's skill is not betrayal of one's own country. Weber's expression became more serious. I read reports of your casualties. 23 men lost during the El Alamein operations. You must understand conventional raids would have cost 10 times that number. Your engineering saved lives, Captain, even enemy lives in a strange way. We stopped attempting to defend everywhere because we knew it was futile, better to accept the raids than waste men in pointless defense. Tommy did not know how to process this. Professional respect from an enemy engineer. Technical analysis that showed genuine understanding of the work. The assertion that building weapons to kill Germans somehow saved German lives by changing their defensive calculations. Why did you want to meet me? Weber was quiet for a moment. Because in another world, we might have been colleagues. You in Stuttgart, me in Glasgow, both building faster cars. Because I wanted you to know that your work was noticed and respected even by those trying to destroy it. Because, he paused, choosing words carefully. Because I believe engineering should be about building, not destroying. After this war ends, perhaps that becomes possible again. He slid the technical folder across the table. My notes include suggestions for improvements, reinforced fuel tank placement, alternative suspension geometries, enhanced crew protection. Perhaps they help someone survive who otherwise would not. That seems appropriate use of 18 months studying how to destroy your vehicles. Tommy picked up the folder, feeling its weight. Pages of detailed analysis from an enemy who had become, in some strange way, a professional peer. Thank you, he said quietly. No, Captain. Thank you for building something that made me think differently about what vehicles could accomplish. For showing that sometimes the best weapon is not the biggest or most armored, but the fastest and smartest. Weber extended his hand. May your next projects be for peace rather than war. Tommy shook the offered hand, holding the technical notes of a German officer who had tried to kill his brothers, but respected the engineering that kept them alive. War was strange. Engineering was stranger. And sometimes the enemy understood your work better than your own commanders. June 3, 1946. Inverness, Scotland. Tommy stood on the dock of Caledonian Canal watching fishing boats return with the evening tide, the Highland Mountains rising blue and distant behind them. He had been home for 7 months. The war was over. The jeeps were decommissioned or sold as surplus. The workshop in Cairo was dismantled. He worked now as a consultant for a British automotive firm, exploring peacetime applications of wartime innovations. The pay was good. The work was safe. It felt utterly hollow. A woman approached along the dock. Mid-20s, dark hair, carrying herself with the quiet competence of someone accustomed to difficult work. Tommy recognized her from the photograph Blackwood had shown him during the war. Emma Blackwood, James's sister. Captain MacLeod. Just Tommy now, no rank anymore. Emma Blackwood, I wrote to you about James. Tommy had received the letter 3 weeks ago. Emma requesting to meet to hear about her brother's final days from someone who had been there. He had delayed responding, uncertain how to explain that her brother had died buying time with sustained machine gun fire against 4 German vehicles while Tommy escaped. I have his notebook, Tommy said, the poems he wrote. He asked me to give them to you if anything happened. Emma took the worn notebook with gentle hands, opening it to pages filled with her brother's handwriting. Poetry about desert and speed and vehicles transformed into philosophy. He wrote about you, she said softly, in his letters home. Said you made miracles from metal, that you taught him precision mattered, that every bolt you torqued was a prayer for someone's survival. It was just engineering. No. Emma looked up from the notebook. James understood the difference between mechanics and meaning. You built machines that saved lives. That is not just engineering. That is purpose. She turned to a specific page. He never finished this one. The poem about ghosts. Would you like to hear it? Tommy nodded, not trusting his voice. Emma read in the fading light, her voice carrying her brother's words across 2 years and a war's worth of distance. We are the ghosts that Rommel cannot catch. 50 miles per hour faster than death. The desert keeps our speed, the stars our path. And when I fall, the jeeps will race ahead. She paused, her voice catching slightly, then continued. Each bolt that Tommy tightened, spring replaced, each mile per hour stolen from the sand, is one more brother who will not be erased by slower hands and less determined plans. The words hit Tommy like physical blows. Blackwood had understood, had seen past the obsessive precision to the purpose driving it, had recognized that engineering was not about metal, but about the men metal protected. I am sorry, Tommy said, the words completely inadequate. He died because my Jeep failed, because I could not make them reliable enough. No, Emma's voice was firm. He died because he chose to, because he believed what you built was worth protecting, because he trusted that his sacrifice would save others. She handed him the notebook. He wanted you to finish the poem, to remember that engineering can be beautiful when it is done for the right reasons. Tommy took the notebook, feeling pages worn from use, stained with desert dust and oil, and the sweat of a poet who learned to torque bolts. After Emma left, he sat on the dock as darkness fell, reading through Blackwood's poems, verses about speed and survival, about machinery elevated to purpose, about a Scottish mechanic who built ghosts. The last poem was unfinished. 8 lines complete. Space left for more. Tommy pulled out a pencil and began to write, feeling presumptuous, attempting poetry, but compelled by a promise made to a friend who had died faster than Tommy could save him. The words came slowly, lacking Blackwood's eloquence, but carrying Tommy's truth. About the cost of innovation. About the brothers saved and the brothers lost. About the mathematics of war and the engineering of survival. He would spend the next 36 years trying to find peace with those equations. The years passed in a blur of consulting work and attempted normalcy. Tommy married in 1949. Margaret, a nurse who had served in North Africa and understood why he sometimes woke from nightmares about burning jeeps. They had 2 children, Andrew named for Tommy's brother, James for Blackwood. He worked on Land Rover development, contributing suspension designs based on lessons learned in the desert. The principles were the same: reliability through intelligent optimization, speed through careful engineering. Every component selected not for maximum capability, but for optimal performance across the widest range of conditions. In 1950, during the Korean War, American Special Forces consulted with Tommy about vehicle modifications for raids behind Chinese lines. He spent 3 months in advisory capacity teaching a new generation that speed properly applied was better than armor improperly positioned. In 1968, during Vietnam, a young Special Forces officer visited Tommy in Scotland, carrying photographs of modified jeeps operating in conditions that would have stopped conventional vehicles. The modifications followed Tommy's design philosophy, adapted for jungle rather than desert. "You changed how we think about mobility," the American said. "Not just in vehicles, in tactics, in understanding that sometimes the right answer is to be faster than the enemy can respond rather than stronger than they can attack." Tommy was 65 years old when that conversation happened, old enough that the war felt like something experienced by a different person. But the officer's words brought it back with crystal clarity. The workshop in Cairo, the endless nights torquing bolts, the mathematical certainty that precision engineering could save lives, had saved lives. 177 at El Alamein alone, thousands more across the rest of the war, also cost lives. 23 at El Alamein, Jock Lewis, James Blackwood, others whose names Tommy still remembered, still carried. The mathematics never balanced. Survival was not zero-sum, but the work had mattered. That was something. October 12, 1982, Imperial War Museum, London. Tommy McLeod, 69 years old, walked slowly through the North African campaign exhibit, his steps careful, his back bent from decades of leaning over engines. The museum was quiet on a Tuesday afternoon, mostly school groups and a handful of military history enthusiasts. He stopped in front of a display case containing a modified Jeep. The placard read, SAS Desert Raider Modified Willys MB, 1941-45, one of approximately 300 vehicles modified for long-range desert operations. Capable of 50 miles per hour across sand-mounting, twin Vickers machine guns, these vehicles revolutionized special operations doctrine. The Jeep was number 4. Lucy, one of the first 6 Tommy had built in Cairo. It had survived the entire war, participated in over 40 raids, and somehow avoided destruction or capture. The museum had restored it to operational condition, though they obviously never ran it. Tommy walked around the vehicle, slowly examining modifications he had made 41 years ago. The suspension still showed his welding. The weapons mount still bore the marks of fabrication in a Cairo workshop. Every bolt still torqued to specification, because that was how he had built them. A young boy, perhaps 10 years old, stood beside the Jeep reading the placard with obvious fascination. He noticed Tommy and brightened. "Mister, do you know about these Jeeps?" Tommy smiled. "A bit. Did they really go 50 miles per hour? The sign says they did, but that seems impossible. My dad's truck only goes 40 on the motorway." "On a good day," Tommy said carefully, "we hit 60. The boy's eyes widened. "You drove one, built them, actually. Really, like you made these modifications." Tommy ran his hand along the hood, feeling metal he had shaped 4 decades ago. "This one specifically. I welded those brackets, installed that suspension, torqued every bolt on this vehicle personally. Were you scared going that fast in the desert with Germans shooting at you? Tommy considered the question. Honesty seemed appropriate. Every day. But fear makes you careful. Careful keeps you alive. Did you win the war? No, son, many people won the war. I just made things go fast enough that some of those people survived long enough to help. The boy thought about that, his young face serious. That is still important, right? Helping people survive. Most important thing there is. The boy's mother called from across the gallery, time to move on. The child waved and ran off, leaving Tommy alone with a jeep that had carried brothers across deserts 4 decades past. He pulled out a worn notebook from his jacket. Blackwood's poems, carried for 36 years, read so often the pages were translucent at the folds. He had finished the last poem in 1946 and never shown it to anyone. Now standing beside a vehicle that represented both triumph and tragedy, he read the final verses aloud in the empty gallery. So let them laugh at jeeps and call us mad. We will answer with the roar of Twin Vickers' song. And when the war is done and stories told, they will remember we were fast and we were strong. Tommy's additions written on a Scottish dock while trying to understand how to live with what he had built. Not glory seekers, not the brave and bold, just engineers and soldiers doing right, turning speed into survival's currency, i.e., racing through the vast North African night. And if I die before this war is won, know this, the jeeps will keep the promise made, that every mile per hour, every raid, brings one more soldier safely to the dawn. But some still fell, and that is what remains. The mathematics cruel, the answers never clean. We saved so many lost, too few and still. Those few are all my aging heart can see. So here I stand before the ghost I built, this metal keeper of both pride and shame. 40 years since I last torqued your bolts, and still you whisper every brother's name. He closed the notebook slowly, placing his hand once more on the Jeep's hood. For Andrew, he whispered. For Jock, for Jimmy, for the 23, for the 177, for all of you. The metal was cool under his palm, silent. Just machinery now no longer racing across sand faster than death could follow. But once these vehicles had flown, once they had been ghosts, once a Scottish mechanic who believed that precision engineering could save lives had made them faster than anything the Germans could field. The mathematics had never balanced, probably never would. But standing there hand on metal, he had shaped. Tommy finally understood what Blackwood had tried to teach him in that desert so long ago. Engineering was not about perfect equations. It was about doing the best you could with the tools available, knowing that best would never be enough, but doing it anyway because some survival was better than none. He had built vehicles that saved lives. That was real. He had built vehicles in which men died. That was also real. Both truths could exist simultaneously. Both truths define the work. Tommy stepped back from the Jeep, straightening his spine despite the arthritis squaring his shoulders, despite 7 decades of accumulated weight. Thank you, he said to the metal, to the ghosts, to the brothers saved and lost, for letting me serve. Then he turned and walked slowly toward the exit, leaving behind a museum piece that had once been revolution, carrying forward the lessons learned in fire and sand and the obsessive torquing of 10,000 perfect bolts. In memory of the 700 men who served in SAS Jeep patrols, 1941 to 1945. In memory of the 79 Jeeps lost in combat. They proved that speed properly applied is the deadliest weapon. They proved that engineering properly motivated can change the mathematics of survival. They proved that sometimes the best revolution comes not from designing something new, but from optimizing something simple until it transcends its own limitations. They were ghosts. They were fast, they were strong, and they were built by men who understood that every bolt mattered, every calculation counted, every second of speed could mean the difference between a brother coming home or staying forever in the sand. The revolution continues, one perfect bolt at a time. The notebook remained in Tommy's family after his death in 1994. Emma Blackwood's daughter donated it to the Imperial War Museum in 2003, along with technical specifications and photographs from the Cairo workshops. Modern special forces still study the SASG program, not for the specific modifications which are obsolete by contemporary standards, but for the philosophy. Speed as weapon, optimization over redesign, individual innovation, changing institutional doctrine. The vehicles themselves are rare. Perhaps 20 survive in museums and private collections. Fewer still are operational, but their influence is everywhere. Every HMMOV and MRZR, every light strike vehicle in modern military inventory carries the intellectual DNA of a Scottish mechanic who believed that careful engineering could save lives and proved it across 200 miles of desert at speeds the enemy could not match. The final page of Blackwood's notebook contains Tommy's handwritten addendum to the last poem dated June 1946. Below Tommy's verse, a single line in different handwriting, Emma Blackwood's added when she donated the notebook. They were fast because they had to be. They were strong because they chose to be. They were ghosts because my brother and men like Tommy McLeod made them impossible to catch. Remember them not for the war they won, but for the brothers they saved. Every mile per hour, every perfect bolt, every night without sleep building machines that brought men home. That was the real victory. That was the revolution. The mathematics never balanced, but the work mattered anyway. And somewhere in a museum in London, a modified Jeep sits silent, waiting for someone else to understand that sometimes the most powerful weapon is not strength or armor or firepower. Sometimes it is just the ability to be 50 miles per hour faster than death itself.